We have a very special musical guest today. Our artists are Smythe and Taylor, a legendary singer-songwriter duo here in Houston. Very well-known, awesome people. You know TC very well because she's our music director at Houston Oasis. And and then Gary is going to, in addition to performing, he's going to share a few thoughts with us during the after the first set of songs. So I think I'm going to turn it over. So let's give it up for Smythe and Taylor.
Yeah. Set it up.
You can go ahead.
Well, we're going to play you a number of songs this morning. Most of them you will not recognize because they happen to be original pieces that Gary has written, appearing on however many CDs we have out right now. But this first one is called Hummingbird, and it's about, sort of was inspired by a hummingbird and a sparrow and the different wildlife that come and visit Gary's house in Colorado. And this one bird keeps following him from window to window to window, like it's trying to tell him something. Hummingbird buzzing round my door, knows just what he's put there for. He flits around from plant to tree, and everything is harmony. Old crow sitting on an old stone wall only lives to give a call. She scavenges her food for free, never wonders about what's to be. Oh, the birds never wonder just what to do. Everybody seems to know their fate but me. Mr. Bear questions not his fate. When winter comes, he hibernates. When springtime comes and he has riz, never wonders if that's all there is. A squirrel is chatting with a lodgepole tree, but he don't need no psychotherapy. If there's more to know about life out there, he don't know, and he don't care. Oh, the bears never wonder just what to do. Everybody seems to know their fate but me. Sparrow resting on my windowsill, he looked at me and said, here's the drill. You and me, we're about the same. You're just distracted by your big old brain. You go through life wondering what's to be. You're too concerned about your destiny. Worry and fear is gonna drive you nuts. You enjoy too little, 'cause you think too much. Oh, the birds never wonder just what to do. Everybody seems to know their fate but me. Even the birds are agnostic. I don't know. I don't care.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Meet folks like you. Here's a song I wrote that seems appropriate for the day. It's called Heaven's Not the Great Beyond. And I envisioned meeting somebody that might have been Jesus in a coffee shop on 3rd and Main.
A lot of people calling themselves Jesus out here.
Well, I ran across Jesus Christ today, glancing through a window pane. He was nursing a cup of coffee at Jack's on 3rd and Main. Well, the fogged up diner window was all there was to keep the cold away. Well, I sat down at his table. I could tell he had a lot to say. I said, I thought you rose to something better when they nailed you to that pine. He said, that's just a little parlor trick to keep the flock in mind. But I thought I'd better try again, 'cause this world's way out of whack, and there's a bunch of people speaking for me who are really off the track. 'Cause heaven's not the great beyond, you can be there every day. Could be talking to some stranger in some coffee shop cafe. And hell is not some place below, it's more a state of mind. It's a sad or lost or wasted day, or a friend you left behind. It's a sad or lost or wasted day, or a friend you left behind. Well, he said, you know those 1-800 righteous folks who declared themselves a saint? Well, if somebody tells you how smart they are, well, it's a sure sign that they ain't. They claim a hotline straight to glory land, to the Lord and all his men. When they go pounding on the pearly gates, well, they ain't getting in. But you know, religion, it is a perfect game. It's like rolling out all sevens, 'cause people trade their Sunday money to buy their piece of heaven. And you can promise folks eternity. Who knows if you lied? Nobody's gonna sue you when they're gone if there ain't no other side. 'Cause heaven's not the great beyond, you can be there every day. Could be talking to some stranger in some coffee shop cafe. And hell is not some place below, it's more a state of mind. It's a sad or lost or wasted day, or a friend you left behind. It's a sad or lost or wasted day, or a friend you left behind. I left a $5 there on the table, paid him for his brew. Well, he died for me all those years ago. It was the least that I could do. The Son of God or just some homeless guy? Well, I guess I'll never know. He just crunched on down the boulevard into the drifting snow. Hey man, what's the secret? I yelled as he faded from my view. He said, treat a stranger like a friend, my friend. Just do what you can do. And live your life full every day. One more thing before I fly. If you want to get to heaven, don't wait until you die. 'Cause heaven's not the great beyond, you can be there every day. Could be talking to some stranger in some coffee shop cafe. And hell is not some place below, it's more a state of mind. It's a sad or lost or wasted day, or a friend you left behind. It's a sad or lost or wasted day, or a friend you left behind.
And now you see the result of my evil plan to control the music booking here at Houston Oasis. Yeah, that's the compensation I get for doing the job, is that I get to call it when I can play sometimes, and that's my compensation. any case, I want to introduce to you the speaker for today, the shorter speaker. His name is Gary Taylor. He was just playing guitar for you. I met him when I worked at Amico Exploration Company back when I had a straight job in the real corporate world, and he did too. He worked there as a paleontologist and a geologist and a senior manager with that company, and I met him there before we both left the company and became a duo. But I've learned over the years he's got some pretty strong opinions, and he's sort of helped me begin to think in this direction, that maybe deism was okay, maybe agnosticism was okay, maybe atheism was okay. So you could say he was a sort of a gateway guy for that. So please put your hands together for Mr. Gary Taylor.
Is the podium wherever you want to be, Gary? I was told I had about 10 minutes, and I went over this morning, and I got it done in 30. So, how many? Where are the geologists in the audience? Thank you. Any paleontologists in the audience?
Our son's trying to.
Our son's trying to be excellent. So. Since I was a paleontologist and geologist, when I talked to Mike, I thought, yeah, maybe there's something in here that might be of interest to this group. And so I actually enjoyed researching it. If you're keeping score, most people know Richard Dawkins and his series of books. A lot of this came from the Theory of Evolution, which is one of the teaching company courses, which I highly recommend any of that. So when you think of paleontology in the news, when you see things, it typically is there's a new dinosaur being discovered. Oftentimes it's and there's always something interesting. It's a link between this and that. It's something, we learn something new almost every time. And oftentimes that stuff is front page news. So that's really great. And the other thing is there's something on evolution, and it's typically some controversy. And paleontology and geology get involved in that. So I thought maybe I'd hit that. So the other day I was at the bookstore, a large chain which shall remain nameless. But I thought, let me do a little research here. You've all noticed the same thing, I suspect. I looked in the science section, and there are sections in a bookcase, like this. So there's 2 sections of science books that are hard science. There were 7 sections that were New Age and astrology, things like that. So palm reading, tarot cards, astrology. Eric von Däniken, who knew? I thought he was gone like in the 70s, but he was there. There were 3 sections of philosophy and 1 shelf of books about atheism and such things. There were 15 titles, and only 1 of them had more than 1 book. Hitchens' Yellow Book had 3 copies. So there was this much. Then on religion, there were 16 sections of books. So science 2, religion 16. So my question is this chain driving this? And the answer is no. They're selling what people will buy. So is religion 8 times more popular than science? I don't know, but those were the numbers. Those were the numbers there. Over the last 25 years, Gallup has surveyed people about their thoughts about basically evolution. How did man get here? And 14%. You've heard percentages. The 1%, the 99%, the 47%. I don't care about any of that. I don't want anybody putting me in a box, so I don't buy any of that. But I am part of the 14%, and the 14% in these surveys are folks that believe that man evolved over time with no supernatural push, if you will. It was all natural. 36% believe that evolution took place over time, but it was pushed by some supernatural force. So the hand of God has a hand in evolution. And then 44, that's close to half, believe that people were formed essentially as they are in the last 10,000 years, and the age of the Earth is sort of 10,000 years. Almost half of the people, which, for somebody as a paleontologist, that's baffling. Most scientists would say 4.6 billion years is the age of the Earth, and millions of years were involved with this. To me, that the bookshelf and those statistics, go hand in hand. So, one question: are we an outlier, the United States? If Europe's been surveyed, our 14%. The highest in Europe is Iceland. 85% believe in evolution, and then it goes down from there. There's 25 countries that are higher in belief in evolution than the United States. So clearly, we are an outlier in sort of this first world tier, in my opinion. So let me not go too long. If you look at these things, way back to Aristotle, who was an atheist, in the Greeks, he developed the idea that species is an interbreeding population. You had Napoleon in the Napoleonic conquests. One of his main science guy was George Cuvier, who's a famous paleontologist, one of the first, who looked at the conquests that Napoleon brought back, including he looked at the ibises that were mummified and put with the pharaohs and that sort of thing, and he noticed that the ibis today was just like this one he was unwrapping. And hey, if the Earth is only 10,000 years old, things haven't changed very much. And 10,000 years old, every people in this room probably know James Ussher, Archbishop, who took the Bible and backed up the generations and came up with the date of October 21st. Actually, the evening before October 21st, 4004 was when it came. So that's better than carbon dating or pre-ring. So then you had, but people noticed. They said there's not change, but people noticed in the fossil strata, in a very broad sense. There's seashells here, higher up, dinosaurs, and then mammals and birds. Something's going on here. So one of the key people in evolution is has the great name of Jean-Baptiste Pierre Antoine de Monnet, more commonly known by his title Chevalier de Lamarck. And Lamarck's thought, I think evolution is happening based on what I see, and his mechanism was called evolution by inherited characteristics. So the classic Lamarck example is the giraffe. We have all these deer-like animal. The giraffe, say there's a drought on the savannah, if I could just get to those leaves up there. So over time, by stretching the neck, this one type of deer could get a little higher, and those characteristics would be acquired by the next generation. And so he put out that theory. It was slammed pretty heavily because there wasn't a lot of evidence for that, but he really got the ball rolling. Fast forward to Charles Darwin, the key guy in evolution, born in 1809, actually February 12th, the exact same day Abraham Lincoln was born on the other side of the pond. Darwin, as a youth, liked to collect beetles and things like that, and in those days, plants were equated with doctors because there were a lot of natural remedies. So he went to Scotland, to the best medical school, quickly determined that while he liked to collect plants, he hated the sight of blood, and so he said, this isn't going to work. Transferred to Cambridge, where he studied to be an Anglican minister, which was one of the key jobs for the gentry back in the day. And because he liked the natural things, his supervisors basically recommended him to participate on the voyage of the Beagle, which is very, very well known. So he was a collector for 5 years. Everybody knows the story. He ended up in the Galapagos Islands, and he noted that the flora and fauna there was different from most any place else. It's about 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador, so it's pretty isolated. And when he looked at the bird population, it wasn't like there were tons of different kinds of birds. There were basically finches and mockingbirds, but the finches, there were 13 different varieties. And he posited that, okay, we started with a core individual and it evolved into these various kinds. He said if God was involved, he would expect more of a random sampling and a lot of different kinds of things. But the fact that you had all these finches that were pretty much the same led him to the same conclusion that Lamarck had, that evolution is probably happening. But he posited a different solution. And the key for him was Thomas Malthus. You probably all remember the Malthusian theories. It was basically Britain was being industrialized, people were coming to the cities. Malthus said, hey, the population is going to outstrip the resources. And his theory was one of three things is going to happen, basically. Disease, famine, or war is going to take out the less fit of the people because there's just not enough resources to go around. And Darwin took that and ran with it. He said, this makes sense as the mechanism. So when he got back from the Beagle, he married Emma Wedgwood, who was wealthy. If you go over to Fred's house, his house is full of Wedgwood jasperware. I think is the thing. And actually, Darwin's maternal grandfather was Josiah Wedgwood, who I think started the company. So Darwin didn't have to worry about working. So when he got back, he could spend full time on his scientific theories. 1842, he developed and wrote down kind of a rough sketch of his theory of evolution. For the next 15 or 16 years, he didn't say word one about it. He published 7 books, and none of them mentioned his ideas on evolution. And he spent 8 years studying barnacles. He was the expert on barnacles. And you go, why? What was the deal? Well, he was a perfectionist. He wanted as much information as he could get. And he also knew that Lamarck sort of got slaughtered when he came out. So he said, I need to have this strong. He also knew that Emma Wedgwood, his wife, was quite religious, and he sensed that this was going to be when this hit, this was going to be big, and it was going to hurt her personally, and that was a big thing for him. He also saw that the church, he appreciated what the church did in society. He thought that was a reasonable thing, even though he wasn't a believer himself. So he sat on this. He could have easily died with this. And there were, what I've heard is only 3 other people knew his theory. Lamarck being, Charles Lyell being one of them. And one day, about 15 years after he developed this theory, he got a packet, and it was a manuscript from Alfred Russel Wallace, and it was basically his theory. He read it and said, "This is my theory, and somebody else has come up with it. I've waited too long." So he went to Lyell and said, "What do I do?" And Lyell, who was connected into the London scientific societies, said, "Well, you should take both your papers and we'll publish them simultaneously, and you'll get like joint credit." And so that's what happened. And what was the Darwin quickly put a manuscript together, and the next year, 1859, was the first edition of On the Origin of Species, which is one of the key scientific books, in Western thought. So as it came out, the proofs that he had, he didn't see evolution happening. It was in the rocks. It was a theory. So it was sort of circumstantial evidence that he used. Paleogeography, like these things are developing, and I can find their ancestors really close by. If they were all spread out, you couldn't really make that argument. Paleontology was really hit. People said, where are the missing links? And you still hear that question today. There's tons of missing links. But back then in the 1870s, for instance, Archaeopteryx was found, the dinosaur with feathers. So it was probably a transition between thought was dinosaurs and birds. If you think dinosaurs disappeared, in one sense they did. In another sense, hummingbird that we sang about, that's if you've ever seen an ostrich chasing you, the thing looks like a dinosaur to me. So, Darwin over 20 years put out 12 different versions of On Origin of the Species, and amazingly, he went from natural selection, which also didn't get, it also didn't play very well. At the end, in the last editions, he was closer to Lamarck and this acquired characteristics than the natural selection. So that's like an amazing thing. And the problem was what was called swamping. So the idea on natural selection was, if there's a litter of rabbits, there's going to be a runt here, there's going to be a fast rabbit here. This one is going to get picked off by a hawk, and this one has a better chance of surviving. That was the basic idea. And these rabbits in the middle are all kind of generic. They may or may not make it. So the idea was, when this one breeds, it's going to breed that trait into the next generations. The problem was swamping. It's basically, when this one breeds, it's probably going to breed with somebody over here, and over time, that advantage is going to get just bled back into the population. So the key was Gregor Mendel, who was also, he was a monk in Austria, and in your science, you remember Mendel, the pea plants, he was growing pea plants. He said, I've got tall pea plants and small pea plants. I'm going to see what happens when I crossbreed them. And amazingly, this kind of thing hadn't been done very much in terms of evolution. And the conventional wisdom would be, you'd get a medium-sized pea plant. But what happened is this was the first generation, and when you crossed them, all of the plants in the second generation were tall. In the third generation, 3/4 were tall, 1/4 was short. So, and we don't need to go into it, but that's the recessive and the dominant gene, that idea. And the idea is these recessive are there, and most of the time you don't use them, but they're still there. So the tall pea plant, it's sunny, there's a lot of rain. Growing tall is a great thing. If it's a drought condition, perhaps this guy has the advantage because it doesn't take as much water to mature. And if you have multiple seasons of drought, those recessive genes pick up and you get a bunch of short pea plants. When you're looking at natural selection, those two things married together is sort of the key. And the amazing thing is, it's said that in Darwin's library, because they were contemporaries, that there was Mendel's manuscript had been sent to him by Mendel, but it was uncut, so it was basically unopened, and it was in German and things like that. So, but Mendel saw that. He sent it to Darwin and said, "Hey, this might help you in your research," but he didn't ever see it. Fast forward to a couple of other great things we don't have time to talk about, but social Darwinism. If you when this stuff all kind of hit hard, people asked, okay, this is happening in biology. What's happening on the social scene? How is there a parallel in society? And laissez-faire capitalism came up heavily at this time. There was industrialization, and it was the corporate survival of the fittest. And if you look at politics today, there's a strong sense that not everybody's going to survive in business, and you better be ruthless and out there and knock it down. Now Darwin, and especially Alfred Russel Wallace, would disagree with using that metaphor because they're not really connected. It's just sort of a mental thing. But you'll find that all the time. So let me just hit a few other things because I know I got more than I can say here.
And people can chat with you over lunch too.
Sure.
We can continue the conversation.
So let me just plant a few seeds. On the religious part. Maybe surprisingly today, but religious folks weren't all that problem by this theory in many respects. But over time, you started to have people who were pretty liberal on the thought. They accepted it, and hey, we're going to include this in the church, and that got a backlash on the fundamental side, and that's carried through to today. In the 20s, you had the anti-evolution crusades. You might remember the Scopes trial, Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan, done in Tennessee. The amazing thing is Scopes actually never taught evolution. It was against the law in Tennessee to teach evolution, and they basically, the evolution side trumped it up and said, we want to take this to trial, we want to make it happen. And Scopes was convicted of teaching evolution, even though he actually never did. But Clarence Darrow, who was defending him, wanted him convicted just to make the point. He was fined $100, and amazingly, H.L. Mencken, the writer, paid his fine. I thought that was cool. And then so you had this, but the upshot of that was evolution disappeared from education in the 20s on, and it disappeared for about 30 years. In about 1960, the scientists got back together because they'd been putting together information and said, this theory is so strong. I mean, this deserves to be heard in the schools. People need to know this. And so they got science and evolution back in the textbooks, and that worked. And now and the backlash on that was the fundamentalists went to homeschooling. And that's a way around, having people hear it in the schools. So where are we today? If you talk to religious people, I gave you the statistics. I'm part of the 14%, but so that leaves about, aside from the 5% who aren't answering the questions, that's like 80% of the people who believe at least the hand of God has some push, and almost half who think the earth is, literally think the earth is 10,000 years old, and man was just sort of immediately placed there as we were, sort of the Adam and Eve story, if you will. So let me just end by saying I live in a small town, Colorado. There's about 400 people in the town, and the adjacent town has a couple hundred people. There must be 20 churches, and everybody, the Lutherans, the Episcopals, the Anglicans, the Catholics, the Methodists, the Anabaptists are well represented. The Mennonites run the bakery. The Amish run the furniture store. There's a Christian Science reading room. I have monthly conversations with my friend who's passing out the Watchtower, and the FLDS is there. The Fundamental Warren Jeffs group is there. There's some of those folks. So how do you get along in a town of 600 people, or an area of 600 people? You don't want to make a lot of enemies, and most people are going to church. But so how do I interact? Well, I don't talk about it overly much unless I'm pretty comfortable about where people are going, because it doesn't matter to me. People, you can believe whatever you want to. It's just it worries me. It makes me sad to have people not experience books like that, and the more fundamental do not, this is not what they're picking up to read. And to me that's sort of a sad thing. But there's plenty that I can get along with people on there. There's hiking, there's skiing, there's art, there's music, there's what's going on in town. And really, when does religion come up in most conversations? It really doesn't, unless you sort of bring it up. So I'll leave it there. This evolutionary theory has percolated over the last 200 years pretty solidly, and really farther back than that. So covering it in 12.5 minutes I've probably not done it justice. But I'd be happy to talk to you other experts after over lunch on a little more of this. So thanks.
This is just a perfect song for passing the basket. I wrote this song after listening to a bluegrass show on KPFT right here in Houston, Texas, and they were playing the old bluegrass song that said, and the title was "You Can't Take It With You When You Go." So you might as well put it in that basket right there. but I thought that is a limiting belief system to me. So about 30 minutes later, I had my new gospel song called "I'm Taking It With Me When I Go." One day, not many years from now, I'll take that final trip, float on into heaven, give gravity the slip. All my earthly duties will be tied up in a bow, but I'm taking it with me when I go. Yes, I'm taking it with me when I go. Look behind my hearse, you'll see a trailer rolling slow. Well, I spent all of my lifetime collecting all that stuff, so I'm taking it with me when I go.
We are having our next Houston show December 21st, the last day on Earth. There's a $500 cover charge. You won't need it the next day.
Well, I'll ride on into heaven in my caddy coupe de ville. The angels at the pearly gates, they should get quite a thrill. Say, people say to me, son, hey, that is one sweet ride. And it goes well with that blonde that's sitting by your side. I said, I'm taking it with me when I go. Look behind my hearse, you'll see a trailer rolling slow. Well, I spent all of my lifetime collecting all that stuff, so I'm taking it with me when I go. Well, I'll have a case of Heineken right there in the trunk. Well, I've spent my whole life in these bars, I ain't some kind of monk. When they see me roll it out, they always sing and dance. Well, there must be beer in heaven, but hey, why take the chance? So I'm taking it with me when I go. Look behind my hearse, you'll see a trailer rolling slow. Well, I spent all of my lifetime collecting all that stuff, so I'm taking it with me when I go. Well, I'll pack up this old Martin for my trip up to the stars. Well, I've had this guitar all my life from Spain to Zanzibar. Well, I'll be a savior in the sky with that earthly souvenir. You know, heart music, it must get old after 1,000 years. So I'm taking it with me when I go. Look behind my hearse, you'll see a trailer rolling slow. Well, I spent all of my lifetime collecting all that stuff, so I'm taking it with me when I go. At the reading of my will, you know, a few tears will be shed. And it will be both short and sweet, just 2 lines will be read. Well, I hope you will not hold your breath as I decompose. 'Cause I'm taking it with me when I go. Yes, I'm taking it with me when I go. Look behind my hearse, you'll see a trailer rolling slow. Well, I spent all of my lifetime collecting all that stuff, so I'm taking it with me when I go. Yes, I'm taking it with me when I go. Yes, I'm taking it with me when I go. Oh, hallelujah. Thank you.
Yeah, I got time to give you a little message. It won't be the usual deal, but I did have a few thoughts I wanted to share with you today. It kind of builds off the evolution thing that Gary did for us. Several years ago, psychologists did a fascinating study involving monkeys. There's a group of 5 monkeys in a cage, and inside the cage they put steps leading up to a banana hanging from the ceiling. And as soon as one monkey started to figure out, oh, there's a banana there, and he climbed the steps to reach for the banana, the researchers sprayed all the other monkeys with cold water. Now this is back before like the ethical treatment of animals and all that. So I'm not advocating this. You know, don't go home and spray any monkeys today. But After a while, another monkey made the attempt to climb the ladder, and they sprayed all the monkeys again. And it wasn't long before all the other monkeys would physically prevent any monkey from climbing the stairs to get to the banana. Then they shut the cold water off, so ended that horrible part of the story, and they removed one monkey from the cage and replaced it with a new monkey. The new monkey saw the banana, started to climb the stairs, and to his surprise and horror, all the other monkeys ganged up on him and dragged him down. And after another attempt, he discovered that if he tried to climb the stairs, he would be assaulted. Next, they removed another of the original 5 monkeys and replaced it with a new one. The newcomer went to the stairs, was attacked, and then the previous newcomer joined in the attack with enthusiasm. Likewise, they replaced the third and the fourth, and finally, all the monkeys were replaced. And every time the newest monkey came in and would try to climb the ladder, he was attacked. The monkeys had no idea why they were not permitted to climb the stairs or why they were beating any monkeys that tried. After replacing all the monkeys, none of the remaining monkeys had ever been sprayed by water. Nevertheless, no monkey ever again approached the stairs to try for the banana. Why not? Because as far as they knew, that's the way it's always been done around here. Silly animals. I mean, I think that just disproves the theory of evolution right there, because we know human beings would never do anything like that. True story, I love this one. In the 1970s, a management consultant was hired to work with a small English manufacturing company to give them advice on how to increase their productivity. And the company produced a report every day that dealt with various aspects of their productivity, and in the upper right-hand corner of the report there was a square, and the figure 0 had been written in that report, and the consultant noted that the figure 0 had been written in every issue of that report all year long, for the entire year. So he questioned members of the staff what was the deal with the box with the 0 in it, and nobody could had a really good answer. So they said, well, the supervisor always told them to put a 0 in it. So he went and asked the supervisor, and the supervisor said he didn't really know. He had always assumed it had something to do with the number of accidents, at the plant. And so, as far as he had known, there had always been a 0 there for the past 25 years that he'd been working there. So he continued to practice. So the consultant really couldn't find anybody at the company that knew anything at all about the 0 in the box at the top upper right-hand corner. And so one day he actually went to the company warehouse where they kept the archives, the company records. And he went back and found this particular report and traced it all the way back, and sure enough, there's a 0 in the upper right-hand corner as far back as the records existed. Finally, he found the original report created in 1942 in pristine condition. And in the top right-hand corner was the mysterious box with a heading written beneath it, clearly shown, number of air raids today. Over time, the heading disappeared, but the number remained. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, we, Homo sapiens, have this dilemma. Because our brains tend to do things automatically. We talk about automaticity. Think of all the things that we accomplish every day without thinking about it at all. And of course, that was a survival mechanism, because it's a way for the brain to conserve precious energy and to do things efficiently. And so that our tendency to learn to do things automatically is, and I was just trying to, I went through a mental list. Think of everything we do. Like if you have to tie a necktie, you can do that without thinking. But then, have you ever had to tie a necktie on somebody else? That's a different beast. It's like your brain feels like it's hurting when it's trying to figure that out. I remember when I had to teach my son how to tie a necktie, and I tried to do it, and I couldn't do it standing in front. I had to stand behind him, and then I could kind of figure out how to do it, because my brain, but I could do it automatically without thinking, standing behind him. And we do hundreds of things like that every day without thinking. But I think there's a downside to automaticity. I mean, that was helpful, and it does help us do things efficiently and so forth. But I think the downside is the ruts. I think maybe I'm just thinking out loud, but this tendency towards automaticity is it's part of the thing that drives us into the ruts of life. Doing the number of air raids today for 25 years or whatever. Not because there's comfort in what we know, and yeah, like learning to tie the tie on somebody else, it's difficult for our brains. It's challenging, and I think maybe it's the automaticity that causes us to cut ourselves off to new possibilities and new ways of seeing the world, and I just want to think about that a little bit today, about this, how do we get out of the ruts of life? How do we, get those lenses where we see things in a new way? And that's definitely one of the things that happened with evolution for me, is it taught me to see the world in a new way I had never seen before. The people in my life who I have maybe have inspired me the most are people who did kind of march to the beat of a different drummer, that didn't accept the routine, didn't get stuck in the ruts, and they realized that the only limit to what we can experience in life is our imagination. One of these guys was a professor at the school where I taught at in Japan for 4 years, Mr. Takaki. And he was an English professor who spoke impeccable English. He was amazing. And he had no accent whatsoever, which is very unusual for a speaker of a foreign language not to have an accent. So I always assumed he had spent a long time studying. He actually spoke with a slight English accent. So I assumed that he had spent a long time studying in England or something like that. So one day I asked him where he had studied overseas. He said, I've never studied overseas. Are you kidding? Perfect English. And I was like, well, how'd you get so good? Well, it turns out that when he was a youth in middle school and high school, he was obsessed with English. He loved English, everything English. And what he would do would be, when English speaking movies were shown in his town, he would go to the local theater. He'd take a little notebook and a little flashlight, and he would sit in the theater and he would write down phrases and vocabulary words. He'd go home and practice it, but mostly he watched The Sound of Music. He watched The Sound of Music over and over and over again, and that's how he learned how to speak English like Christopher Plummer. And he really did. But I mean, it just amazes me. It's like, you always sense, oh yeah, you got to go, if you want to learn a language, you have to go study abroad to do that. And no, here's a kid in Japan who showed all you got to do is go down to the movie theater with a flashlight, and it can be done. That amazed me. One of my pet peeves is a conversation that goes something like this. An adult asks a college student, what's your major? And if the college student says something like art history, what is the inevitable reply? What are you going to do with that? Like, maybe have an interesting life. Anything I want to do. Fact, still today, more CEOs of Fortune 500 companies in the United States were liberal arts majors than either engineering or business. And I'm not saying it's better. Don't misunderstand what I said. I'm not saying it's better. All I'm saying is, there are many paths in this world, other than the set path, the expected path, the conventional path. There are many ways to get things done. And I just hate that lack of vision. I have an aunt, dear aunt, who's a gifted surgeon, and she spent her career in academic medicine, so she sat on the admission committees of many for medical schools, and she told me once that art history majors have a higher rate of acceptance in medical school than organic chemistry majors do. Because she said, what we're really looking for is a well-rounded person. Once you get your science prerequisites out of the way, you don't need any more science than that. But we're looking for other things too. I was talking to my college roommate a while back, and he's one of these guys who likes to look up old people, and he got in touch with a guy who used to live down the hall from us in the dorm at Michigan many years ago. And it turns out this guy is now like the treasurer of Oracle. Another liberal arts major. He was a liberal arts major. Made me feel like a loser. But,
Took a different path.
Took a different path, thank you.
You'll always be a winner with us, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
And you're happy.
Wow, you just made my day. Thank you.
Amen.
Yeah.
He asked for that. That was wide open.
Yeah. Last year, a New York Times syndicated columnist, David Brooks, issued a challenge to his readers over the age of 70, and he asked them to send him essays reflecting on their life. All of his, kind of the older demographic of his readership. Send him, I forget what he specified, but kind of reflect on your life, having lived a large portion of it, and what lessons might other people glean from that. It was a fascinating exercise, and you should look it up because he spent several other columns talking about the results, some of the responses he got. And after he got the essays, he said one of the recurring themes he was struck by, it came up again and again, is that how many people wish they had done more with their lives. He said the most common lament was from people who had worked for one company their entire lives. He cited one man who described a long, uneventful career working at an insurance company. The man wrote, and this is a quote from his essay, "I wish my profile were more exciting, but it's too late now." Many others regretted risks not taken. Others wished they had been more intellectually, had more intellectual curiosity or hadn't been so lazy. And I do think these essays are a wake-up call, just a reminder of how life can pass us by if we don't grab it. But I would challenge the man who thought it was too late, because you know what? I think as long as there's breath in your body, it ain't too late. It's not too late to do something. And maybe that's part of that mindset that he still felt stuck. I don't know. The history of science and business and culture is littered with people who were unable to break out of the conventional wisdom. You're going to know some of these, but I still enjoy these. 1968, the Swiss dominated the watch industry. Then some Swiss inventors came up with an electronic watch movement. It was rejected by every Swiss watch manufacturer because if it didn't have springs and gears, it must not be a watch. So they sold the idea to Seiko, which ended up dominating, went on to take over the world watch market. Yeah, you know this one, but this is worth doing again. Okay, this one's really well known. The idea of a personal computer came along. IBM said there would be no market for it. An internal memo at IBM said there would be no more than 5 or 6 people in the entire world would have a need for a personal computer. The other day I was wondering how long have copy machines been around? So I looked it up, and the first Xerox machine was made in 1938. I didn't realize that's the first Xerox machine, by a guy named Chester Carlson. Again, every major corporation turned the idea down, including Kodak and IBM, again. Why are they still around? And what? Kodak? Yeah, I mean IBM. But this is, why would anybody want to buy an expensive copier when carbon paper was so cheap? And this is my personal favorite. 1962, Columbia Records producer John Hammond and TC and Gary don't say anything, signed a record deal with a young folk singer whose first album sold only 5,000 copies, barely enough to break even. The other record executives started referring to the deal as Hammond's folly. They really told him, you got to drop this guy. Hammond refused. Later that year, the singer officially changed his name from Robert Zimmerman to Bob Dylan. I want to read you a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. "The secret of a joyful life is to live dangerously. A joyful life is an active life. It is not a dull, static state of so-called happiness. It's full of the burning fire of enthusiasm, anarchic, revolutionary, energetic, filled to overflowing with a terrific urge to create. Such is the life of the man who risks safety and security for the sake of happiness and growth." I love that quote. I think I might put it up on the website or pass it around to you guys, because you probably want to see it again. I think we have more than a few people in this room who see life that way, and I think it's one reason why we're off to such a great start. Last week we had this community discussion about where we would like to see our community go in the next 2 years and next 10 years, and I was really struck by the number of BHAGs that came up. BHAG, B-H-A-G. It's an acronym, I think it was coined by Jim Collins, the business guru, in his book Good to Great.
stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goals. And actually, the thing that I learned last week was that your vision for what we can do is bigger than mine. Several of you suggested doing things that, like some major project, like eradicating a disease, like the Gates Foundation does, or setting a goal of ensuring secondary education for every human being on the planet. I mean, there's nothing wrong with big, hairy, audacious goals. It's the only way you get somewhere. Many people had a vision of growing to become a national movement. That came up again. Here's one of you even said 10 years from now, you'd like to see Houston Oasis make Joel Osteen look like an amateur. That was an actual quote. So, well, stranger things have happened. And if it doesn't quite turn out that way, I'm just glad to be on the journey with people who don't want to waste life, with people who have a larger vision for making this world a better place, who have a vision for the joy of living dangerously. That's all I got for you today. It's time for lunch. Okay, let's thank TC and Gary.